Hello, everyone. My name is Tess Greinock, and I'm here today with Leah Honor. We are your research data and scholarly communications librarians here at UMass Chan. At the end of today's session, we hope that you will know what resources are available to identify potential journals for manuscript submission and/or alternative publishing platforms and how to access them, understand and apply criteria for journal selection, and understand the difference between a legitimate and a predatory open access journal. When you're preparing your manuscript, an important step is to choose an appropriate journal that is likely to accept your work. We always recommend consulting with your mentors and colleagues about journals that they use, but the good news is that you have access to several tools that can also help, such as Jane, Jot, Elsevier Journal Finder, the Springer Nature Journal Finder, Directory of Open Access Journals, and Scopus. And I'll briefly review each of these tools. So Jane stands for the Journal Author Name Estimator and was developed by the Department of Medical Informatics at Erasmus University Medical Center in Rotterdam, Netherlands. Jane searches PubMed research articles published over the last 10 years and is updated monthly. You can search Jane by entering the title and abstract of your manuscript or by keywords to find an appropriate journal to publish in. Relevant articles to cite in your paper, or if you're an editor, you can also find reviewers for a particular paper. For this example, I submitted the abstract of a preprint about the treatment of vascular disease using CRISPR technology. For each journal, Jane lists the confidence it has with recommendation and the article influence score for the journal. The article influence measures how often articles in the journal are cited within the first 5 years after its publication. These citations are weighted based on the influence of the journals from which citations are received, and being cited in an article in Science, for example, can boost a journal's article influence more than being cited in an article in an obscure journal. For more detailed information, you can find that on the Eigenfactor website. The bluer the bar on the right, the more influential the journal. What's also helpful is that by clicking on the Show Articles button, you can review the articles that the search engine is using to identify relevant journals. The display also provides some information about free articles access at the journal website or in PubMed Central. So you can see the little PMC tag for PubMed Central, for example. Now, our second finder, Jot, or Journal Targeter, is sort of like Jane 2.0, since it builds upon Jane's API and data from PubMed, Directory of Open Access Journals, Sherpa Romeo, Scopus, and Journal Citation Reports, which is a Clarivate product. You enter a title and abstract with an optional reference file as an RIS, which you can export from any citation manager or literature database. And the search results are displayed in a multi-dimensional interactive plots. And I've used the same example here. So the prospect tab shows the prospect metric, which is described as a crude proxy for the chance of your manuscript being accepted against site score, which is the Elsevier version of the impact factor. The articles tab, which is displayed on the right hand of the slide, shows the similar articles found for each journal based on the references, abstract, and title submitted, and the site score for each journal. The two tabs that I don't show on this slide, table puts all the data gathered in a table, and fit shows two charts, one of which is the citation abstract and title hits against site score, and the second one is similarity against site score. And what I especially like about Jot is that this tool has an exploring the results drop down that you can open to be able to see these explanations for all four tabs and get some more information. So publishers also have their own journal finder tools, which help authors select an appropriate journal from the journals that they publish. And it's great if you're hoping to work with a particular publisher and don't know which journal to submit to. The first publisher journal finder we're sharing today is Elsevier's. The tool matches the content of abstract or keywords you submit to all papers published in Elsevier journals. You can also check if there's open access discounts for any of the journals based on your affiliation and the affiliation of your co-authors. Unfortunately, we currently don't have any open access discounts with Elsevier, so it might be useful to check what your co-authors have available to them. So the suggested journals are sorted with the best matches listed at the top, and there's some very helpful information about each journal, including impact factor, site score, acceptance rate, speed from submission to a decision, and acceptance, whether open access is available, and the fee. And you can sort by these other factors if you'd like, and go to the journal website for more information. For comparison, another publisher, Springer Nature, has their own journal finder. You can enter a title or abstract or keywords, and Springer Nature includes the popular BMC journals. Performing the same preprint abstract search return these results. Other publishers that also have a journal finder tool include Wiley and Tyler & Francis. And if submitting to a journal that provides open access is important to you, the Directory of Open Access Journals, or DOAJ, is an important tool. The DOAJ is an online directory that indexes and provides access to over 20,000 high-quality open access peer-reviewed research journals covering all areas of science, technology, medicine, social science, and humanities. It's a comprehensive and well-respected resource for locating open access journals because DOAJ has strict criteria for inclusion. We'll speak a bit later about other ways to evaluate journals, including open access journals. You can search the site by keywords to find a journal to submit your articles, and it will also identify articles from all journals indexed in DOAJ that contain that keyword. Here are the search results for the keyword cardiovascular. There are links for each journal and information about its peer review process, open access article processing fee, license, and other information. The last tool I'll be describing is Scopus, which is the largest abstract and citation database of peer-reviewed scientific literature. It indexes more than 27,900 journals from thousands of publishers. Like Medline and DOAJ, Scopus has strict criteria for inclusion. If your research is interdisciplinary, Scopus is a useful resource because of its broad scope. And there's a couple ways that Scopus can be useful to researchers who need to choose an appropriate journal for publication. First of all, you can use the list of journals indexed, which can be searched and browsed, or you can use the analyze results of just a general search. So we're going to start with using the sources option, which gives you the list of journals and is available through the sources link at the top of the page. You can search by title, ISSN, publisher, or subject area. In this example, I've searched the subject genetics clinical. You can sort by all the metrics that Scopus includes, such as site score, which, as I mentioned earlier, is similar to the impact factor, and we're going to talk more about these metrics in a minute. And if you click on a journal title, you can read detailed information about the journal. Note the site score rank section that's sort of at the bottom of the page. This journal, Nature Reviews Genetics, is ranked first among the 347 journals in the category of genetics. You can also click on the information icon next to each metric on this page for more information. If you navigate to the site score, rank, and trend tab, you can view a ranked list of all the journals in that category. And this can be very useful for finding relevant journals in your field. I mentioned earlier that you can also analyze Scopus search results to identify an appropriate journal for publication. In this example, I did a search for CRISPR and cardiovascular. On the search results page, there's a link to Analyze Search Results, which I've circled in red on the slide. The Analyze Search Results page includes a card that provides data on documents per year by source. And these are the journals that articles were published in, sorted in descending order by number of articles. And you can click on the journal title to get the detailed information like we saw on the previous slide. So now it's your turn to test out one of these tools. We're going to drop the tool links in the chat, as well as a link to a preprint you're welcome to use as an example for the title, abstract, and keywords. And we would like you to input your own title, abstract, and/or keywords, or input the example into one of the tools discussed, and let us know when you have your results by using the green check mark in the reactions. And also, I'm going to check the chat right now to see if there's any questions, or if there's any questions, feel free to add them in the chat or speak them out loud. I will take it out. Right, I think we're ready to move on. So, once you have a list of journals to choose from, here are some important criteria to keep in mind when choosing a journal that is a good match for your research. So first of all is scope. Does your research fall within the scope of the journal? Is this a journal that is used by you, your mentors, or colleagues to keep track of new developments in your field? And how many manuscripts get rejected because, many manuscripts get rejected because they are out of scope for the journals they are submitted to. So this is something very important to check. Second of all, who is your desired audience? For instance, if your target audience is international, you want to select a journal with an international focus. If your research area is very specific, journals with a narrow focus may disseminate your work more effectively than a general science journal. The other thing you're going to want to check is the publication types and format. Some journals publish specific types of research and may not be appropriate if you have a specific manuscript type in mind. And another factor is reputation. Is the journal published in an established publisher or recognized for professional society? Who is the editor? Who is on the editorial board? Who has published in it? What are the acceptance and rejection rates? And what is the impact factor or site score? Note that it's not possible for a new journal to get an impact factor until it's been published for at least 3 years. And what is the average time to acceptance and time of publication? And this is a factor that would fall under quality. Is it a peer-reviewed journal that provides a description of their peer review process? Is it indexed in Medline and other quality citation databases such as Scopus and Web of Science? Also, consider reviewing the journal articles published in the journal over the past few years. Do they meet your standards for rigor and quality? Another thing you're going to want to check is their editorial policies. What are the journal's word count restrictions? So these are most likely going to be in the author submission guidelines. Does the journal allow authors to comply with the public access mandates of the NIH or other funders for publications or data? Does the journal have its own data availability policy you have to comply with? And does the journal post a statement outlining their practices? And finally, access. Does the journal allow for free access to their articles? What are the open access options? And is there a fee to publish an article open access? Reputable journals will have an About This Journal page where you can start to find answers to those questions. For example, this journal information page for experimental and molecular medicine has information about its aims and scope, journal metrics, and where it is indexed. One word of caution, you may want to verify any stated impact factor in the Elsevier Journal Finder or Scopus, as sometimes unscrupulous publishers will post an impact factor that does not exist. More on that from Leah shortly. It is well worth your time to review a journal's About page and website if you're seriously considering a journal publication. When most people think of journal metrics, they think of the impact factor, which provides the average citations received per document published in a journal for the past 2 years. Site score is a similar metric, but is calculated for the previous 3 years. 2 other journal metrics that you may want to consider are the SJR, or Simago Journal Rank, which measures weighted citations received by the journal, and citation weighting depends on the subject field and prestige, or SJR, of the citing journal. And SNP, or Source Normalized Impact per Paper, measures the actual citations received relative to citations expected for the journal subject field. All 3 of these metrics are comprehensive, transparent, current metrics for journal titles available in Scopus. Another way that I like to think of these metrics is that if every article is a cookie and the number of citations is chocolate chips in the cookie and journals or the cookie jar, impact factor and site score are looking at the number of chocolate chips over the number of cookies in the jar. Simago Journal Rank gives different weight to different types of chocolate chips. And Source Normalized Impact per Paper takes into account that different cookie batters are more likely to have chocolate chips in them. And I just eat all the cookies. Keep in mind that these metrics do not take context, positive or negative citations, or intentionality, like self-citation, into account. If you're considering publishing open access, one criteria you may want to consider are the publishing discounts available to you. At UMass Chan, we have several discounts from our agreements and memberships with publishers such as Biomed Central and Springer Open, Cambridge University Press, Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory Press, Company of Biologists, and PNAS. So now that we've given you some criteria, which of the top 3 suggestions in your search you just completed sounds most promising? Feel free to add your answer to the chat and add any questions there as well.
Okay, so we have all heard the term predatory publishing, and we've all been warned against predatory publishing. But what exactly is it? So in a Nature article by Grudnewitz, Agnes et al., it was defined as predatory journals and publishers are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship and are characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practices, a lack of transparency, and or the use of aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. So how can you identify a predatory journal and avoid submitting your manuscript to a predatory journal? Unfortunately, there is no single easy answer. The first step is usually to consult some sort of registry or list to figure out if a journal is legitimate or predatory. But keep in mind that not all lists agree, as you can see demonstrated here, and that journals themselves can evolve over time. So something that may have early on been on somebody's verified list may have gotten new ownership or may have drifted over the course of time into a different category. And here on this slide, you can see the original list of predatory journal was always called Beale's List. It was created by an individual librarian. It is no longer being maintained, but is one of the original blacklists. And on the other side of that is the legitimate journals listings through DOAJ of open access journals with very strict criteria. So in selecting a publishing venue, authors must use due diligence to ensure that they don't fall prey to predatory publishers. There have always been vanity presses and publishers who are more interested in their bottom line than in upholding the ideals of research and scholarship. But the development of open access publishing has created an additional space for unscrupulous actors to exploit that author pays economic model of open access and the author's need to publish for their own gain. These scam publishers seek out content and will publish pretty much anything as long as you pay the publication charge without providing the editorial services expected of a scholarly publication. They are also growing in number, as illustrated in the figure on this slide. This study demonstrates that there were approximately 8,000 predatory journals in 2014 that were responsible for 420,000 articles, a growth of over 300% from the 1,800 predatory journals that were identified in 2010. The concern about predatory publishing is twofold. Predatory publishers exploit authors who are either inexperienced or under pressure to publish, or serve those who want to avoid intense scrutiny. So on that last point, there was an article that had been published in Bloomberg Businessweek that noted that the prevalence of papers by pharmaceutical companies that are published in known predatory journals has greatly increased. So by doing so, the predatory publishers are corrupting the scientific record with low-quality science, wasting research dollars. And an article published in Nature in 2017 found that within their sample, the majority of articles were deficient in terms of either the description of study methods and results, the reporting of funding, the approval from ethics committees, or study registration that is generally required for things like clinical trials and systematic reviews. So how could this affect you? So as a student, you need to be aware of the rise of predatory publishing and be able to evaluate sources of information to determine if they meet standards for things like academic integrity or scientific and industry quality standards. As a researcher, predatory publishing can actually be more of a risk than a benefit. It may get you a publication to put on your CV, but it could cost you in other ways, such as losing the opportunity to publish that work in a legitimate journal, or could tarnish your professional reputation by association with a known predatory publisher. As a medical provider, you need to be able to find reliable, high-quality information for both yourself and your patients and avoid some of these pay-to-play publishers. It's important to note here that although open access publishing is the business model through which predatory publishers thrive, not all open access journals are predatory. Related to predatory practices, which we will talk about in a minute, there is the perception that open access journals are intrinsically low in quality. But in fact, most open access scholarly journals conduct peer review and follow industry-wide publishing standards. Most major publishers now have an open access option for their submitting authors, and this does not change the submission, peer review, or editorial process for those journals or articles. Some open access journals are very important and influential in their fields and across many fields. For example, BMJ, the PLOS entire ecosystem, including PLOS Medicine, BMC Medicine, Annals of Family Medicine, Journal of the American Board of Family Medicine, BMC Family Practice are all open access journals and are all in the top 10 of their disciplines. So we're beginning to see that studies that evaluate the quality of open access journals as compared to traditional subscription journals. Some of them, such as the one that is cited here on this slide, have found that open access journals in the field of oncology are comparable if you look at the methodological quality of the papers. As noted, this is not the case with predatory publishers where the quality is often low. In addition, not all open access journals charge an author processing charge, or APC. The DOAJ database shows that approximately 70% of open access journals provide their content without a charge on either the author or the user end. These journals are clearly not in it for the money, and actually our own library participates in this and publishes some journals with this model. So, how do you know when you are dealing with a predatory publisher? Predatory publishers engage in unethical or questionable practices to solicit and process content, such as those listed here. The most familiar of these behaviors is the aggressive solicitation or the Dear Doctor emails. In addition to these behaviors, here's a list of 13 common characteristics of predatory publishers, as found by Shamsier et al. In their comparison of potentially predatory, presumed legitimate open access journals, and presumed legitimate subscription-based biomedical journals. Let's take a look at an example of a predatory journal solicitation email. What are some of the things that you see that might make you suspicious? So, sorry, this formatting got a little messed up, but it says we are impressed that your expertise is related to us. This is really non-specific and could be sent to anyone and probably was. There are typos and odd phrasing. There's no mention of the review process or submission criteria. They are just asking you to submit. And in this case, it showed up in your spam email folder. And the signature on the email is not somebody listed on the journal website. And the return email is not one that can be found on the publisher's website either. But maybe it was just somebody spoofing a legitimate journal. Let's check out the journal's website and see how that stacks up. So when looking at the author's guideline page, we see this line. APCs are charged at the applicable rates effective on your submission date. This is problematic because it implies that either publication happens and thus the author is charged regardless of the review process outcomes, or that the author is charged even if the review process denies the manuscript. Neither of these is appropriate or would be the way a legitimate publisher operates. So as a reminder, when evaluating whether a journal might be predatory or not, start with the publisher's website or the journal's author page, check details such as the guidelines, the fees, timelines, and if the editorial board and affiliated personnel make sense. Check if the ISSN database information matches. Check if the journal is indexed by reputable databases such as Medline, Scopus, or Web of Science. And you can always do a quick search online for any glaring red flags or other author reviews saying that this was an inappropriate journal. Some issues that may lead you to decide that a journal is predatory are things such as the ISSN does not exist or is for a different journal that does. The editorial board is non-existent or falsely advertises members. Often there will be names that do not match the listed affiliations. The review process is not clearly presented. They promise very fast publication times. This can be matters of days or weeks from submission to publication. The journal website is geared specifically to authors and not to readers, meaning they are more in the business of soliciting submissions than in posting content. There are many typos in the emails or advertisements from the publisher. There are fees associated just with the submission process, not with the publication process, and indexing metrics are not accurate. So here's one fairly obvious example of a publisher website with some issues. So along with issues of incorrectly advertising their editorial board, the speed of publication and the low APC, which is listed as $30. There are also typos and no email in the contact us page, just a phone number and a WhatsApp link. These are all things that should give you pause. So here's another example that's less obviously questionable, but with some digging, issues emerge. There's no reviewer information from the publisher. The editorial board advertises what appear to be fake members or affiliation. And this article in particular lists less than 2 weeks between the article's submission date and the publication date. Things did speed up and move fast during the pandemic, but this article from 2022, that is no longer a realistic turnaround time. So when evaluating an open access publisher or journal, there are a few tools to help you in your decision making. The first is the Think, Check, Submit campaign, which is meant to help researchers identify trusted journals for their research. It's supported by the DOAJ, BMC, the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association, which also has a code of conduct that their members, who are open access publishers, are expected to follow. Their checklist is very useful, and we will see it in just a minute. The Open Access Journal Quality Indicator site, maintained by the Grand Valley State University, has an excellent list of positive and negative indicators of journal quality. So it's not a list of journals, but just metrics for your own evaluation. DOAJ serves as a whitelist of open access journals. If a journal is in the DOAJ, then it has been vetted and can be assumed to be legitimate. And the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association is a group of committed open access publishers with criteria for membership and a code of conduct. If a publisher is listed as a member of this organization, then they can be trusted to generally follow best practices for publication. So here for your convenience is the Think, Check, Submit checklist for evaluating a journal. If you can answer yes to most or all of these questions, then you can generally trust the journal. Together with the 13 characteristics of predatory publishers that we noted earlier, this list can help you differentiate predatory from legitimate journals. However, it should be noted that there can be overlap and ambiguity with smaller, legitimate publishers who are seeking to support research in developing parts of the world. Many of these journals are newly founded, so won't be in indexing databases such as Medline or Scopus yet, and they may not have an impact factor due to the length of time that they've been in existence. For example, the Journal of Global Radiology, if you rang this checklist, you might have doubts, but that is actually one of the journals published by our library. So these criteria should be weighed carefully and thoughtfully whenever selecting a journal. So remember, not all open source publishing is predatory, and open access does not mean less reliable, but make sure that you are doing your due diligence in order to be choosing those reputable and legitimate publishers possible. So why does this have to be so hard? Because there are a lot of factors influencing scientific publishing, and not all are in it for the greater good. Self-interest shows up in many ways. Journals are looking to make money. Many of them are run by for-profit companies. So quantifying transparency is hard. How much information is enough, and sometimes what looks suspicious is in fact legitimate, and vice versa. There are also a lot of caveats to all of these criteria and lists. No single criteria is really sufficient to make a judgment. Rapid publication was completely normal and in fact prioritized during the pandemic by most journals, not just predatory ones. Niche research areas may have higher fees, or journals that produce specialized materials such as really high quality image may justifiably have to charge more for their publications. So now it is time for you to do some practice doing this evaluation for yourself. For the most promising journal that you found in your earlier activity, does it meet all the criteria in the journal evaluation checklist? If not, where does it fall short? The link for the checklist should have been posted in the chat, and we will give everyone a couple of minutes to look it over and see if they find any interesting findings. Okay, so while we have spent most of our time today on finding appropriate journals for your manuscript and making sure that you're not contributing to predatory publishing, there are also other publishing venues and platforms to consider in the process of producing a manuscript and hopefully turning it into a publication. So the first is a preprint. As defined by ASAP Bio, a preprint is a scientific manuscript that is uploaded by the authors to a public server. The preprint contains data and methods, but has not yet been accepted by a journal for publication. While some servers perform brief quality control inspections, the author's manuscript is typically posted online within a day and without any peer review that can be then viewed and possibly translated, reposted, or used in other ways without charge by anyone in the world. Preprints allow scientists to directly control the dissemination of their work to the worldwide scientific community. They can provide a priority claim by disclosing a completed study. They can also increase citations to the final paper as people are more familiar with the work. They receive feedback. Sometimes preprint will allow for something called open peer review, and provide funders and hiring committees with public evidence of your work in a more timely manner than traditional published articles. Often for a traditional peer-reviewed journal article, the manuscript is submitted, and if it's accepted, sent through peer review and finally published, which can take between 4 to 12 months. A preprint, on the other hand, once posted to a preprint server, is available generally within 1 to 2 days and is then available for community feedback, peer review, and collaborations. And preprints can be updated, so they do not have to be the static record. Preprints may become peer-reviewed published journal articles, with most journals in the life sciences accepting things that have been posted as preprints. The advantage of publishing your preprint at the time of submission means their faster dissemination and scoop protection. Here you can see that the preprint and final versions of a paper with about a 5-month time lag between the two. So there are many preprint servers, often discipline specific. So the ones that we see used most commonly here at UMass Chan include things like bioRxiv and medRxiv. We also have an institutional repository here at UMass Chan called eScholarship at UMass Chan, which can be a place to deposit not only manuscripts as allowed during the publication process, but also your presentations, posters, data sets, and more. All items in the repository receive digital object identifiers and are discoverable through online search engines such as Google or Google Scholar. They can also be cited and included as research products on your CV or biosketch. Thank you. And Tess and I would like to acknowledge that portions of this seminar were developed by Sabrina Brown during her North Atlantic Health Science Library's Health Science Libraries Apprenticeship Program internship here with us in the Lamar Super Library. At this time, we are happy to end the recording and take any questions.